Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining. We're just going to give everyone a couple minutes to join the webinar before we get started. Hello to everyone, and thank you for joining us for week number 3 of our forum month. My name is Alice, and I will be moderating today's session. As I've mentioned in some of our previous sessions, we really would have loved to host everyone in person at our annual forum, but we are very happy to have all of you join us today for this virtual session. Today, I'd like to introduce a session under our advanced track titled Uncovering Mobile App Technology and Why It Makes Sense for Your Business. But before we kick things off, please take a quick moment to review the GoToWebinar control panel located on the right-hand side of your screen. You may utilize this panel to chat with us and send us any questions you have. We will be watching this panel, and at the end, we will try and get through as many of your questions as we can. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and introduce you to today's speaker, Lino Tadros. He will be taking us through our presentation today. Over to you, Lino.
Hello and good morning, everybody. It's such a pleasure to present to our loyal and wonderful customers here at American Eagle, and I'm very excited. This is the first year for me to actually participate in the forum. I'm really looking forward to do it in person next year, and I hope all of you are safe and well during these unprecedented times in the world. My name is Lino Tadros. I'm the Chief Evangelist and the Head of Training at American Eagle. I have been blessed being the Microsoft Regional Director and also an MVP for Microsoft for the last 15 years. I'm also an AI and machine learning solution architect. I've written a dozen books on software over the last 30 years, and I've been awarded the Community Hero for Smart Bear for testing software for the last 20 years. I've been very happy to be the chief architect of a lot of major projects that I really enjoyed for NASA, for Disney, for Hewlett-Packard, and a lot of other companies as well. 30 years ago, I was actually an original member of the Delphi and C++ compiler team at Borland. For those of you that remember that company from 30 years ago, I also spoke in a lot of different technical conferences around the world, 53 countries so far, and I've architected and produced over 250 apps in the Apple Store and the Google Play for the last 10 years. I actually have a lot of different courses that are available for technical courses for Eagle Academy, for Pluralsight, for Udemy.com as well. And I founded 2 successful software company and 1 IoT company in the past as well. The agenda for today, for the next 40 minutes or so, we're going to be talking about mobile and why is it something that you really need to consider. And even if you're doing it right now, the different ways probably you want to find out about the state of the world. What is the state of the union as far as mobile development in the world today? We're going to talk about the 10 major players in the industry right now regarding writing applications for iOS and Android and Windows and so on. We'll also talk a little bit about progressive web apps. And finally, we'll talk about the future of mobile in the next couple of years. So when you say couple of years, like 2 years, for instance, that's eternity in our industry because things change so fast. So who knows what will happen next year, but we at least can share with you what's happening in the next 18 to 24 months in the industry and what we expect for the mobile as well. And like Alice said, thank you, Alice. Make sure you enter your questions in the questions window. I'll be more than happy to leave time at the end to answer some of your questions as well. So let's talk about the mobile state of the union right now. There's a lot of different ways of writing mobile applications. Some of them are native directly to these devices like iOS, iPhones, iPads, or Android tablets or Android phones. Or there is a way to do it, something called the hybrid. That means we're going to be running inside of a web view. It's a little bit more limited than having a native application, but it also can be very fast. And based on what you're trying to do, could be very efficient for your company as well. These are the 10 most used mobile frameworks right now. If you take a look at the Stack Overflow survey this year for over 3.5 million developers around the world, and companies and CTOs and CIOs, you will notice these are almost 86% of all applications written are being written by some of these 10 different mobile frameworks in the world right now. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about each one of them so our customers know the difference between them, and maybe that can generate some questions on your side as well. That would be great. So the first one is Flutter. This is coming from Google, as a matter of fact. This is a mobile app SDK that you can write for iOS and for Android as well. It's not only for Google Play or for Android, it's also for iOS, even though it's coming from Google. And it's pretty rich, and it actually uses the material designed for all the user interface for these applications. So a lot of people love to use it. There are a couple of major applications in the Apple Store and in the Google Play, like Alibaba, for instance, is written in Flutter. Also, the mobile app for Google Ads, which have millions of customers using it right now, is all written in Flutter as well. It has been released in 2017, and it's using a language called Dart. I know it's not a very popular language. Some scientific people definitely, or technical people more know about Dart, but it's not one of the very famous or popular languages. You can think of it as a competitor of TypeScript. So instead of writing the code in JavaScript, you can use type-based language, and Dart is a language. It's not something that will spit out JavaScript like TypeScript does, but Dart is a language. It is used for Flutter to do that. All right, so that's the first one, and it's available for if your customer, if our developers here and your customer also like to use Dart and like to use something coming from Google, Flutter will be a great way of writing native apps. These are not hybrid apps. These will be native apps. Native app means that we are going to be writing directly to the iOS framework, like the Cocoa framework, and also the Java framework for Android. So we're not creating like a sandbox for us to play in for this app. No, it's going to go directly all the way native to the application itself. The next one, which is very, very popular, is React Native. You probably heard about React Native. A lot of companies use it. It is also producing native application. This is not a hybrid framework. This is a native application. You can use React JS. You can use JavaScript. You can also use TypeScript as the language to write the code for that. There's a lot of very famous application written in React Native in the Apple Store and also in the Google Play. Like the Facebook application itself. That's of course because React Native is owned by Facebook. Facebook is the inventor of the React Native and React itself. And the Facebook application has over 55,000 components in the application. So every time you open up your phone and you play around with Facebook and post something in there, just remember that this application has over 55,000 components in React Native available inside of it. So it works very fast and it performs very, very well. Instagram is the same way, Airbnb, Uber Eats, all of these applications are written using React Native. There's hundreds of other applications in the store using that as well. Ionic, you probably heard that name before. Ionic is very famous. It's actually using Angular as the JavaScript framework, Angular, and it's running on Apache Cordova. Once the word Apache Cordova comes up, folks, always remember that this will never be native. This will be running inside of a sandbox. This will be a hybrid application. That doesn't make it bad. It just makes it definitely less performant than a native application. And sometime in your application, you don't need all the bells and whistles for that speed. For instance, TD Ameritrade, Mobile, the Untapped, MarketWatch, and Amtrak, these are all very famous applications. They're all written in Ionic, and they perform pretty well. It's using the TypeScript language, and it has been released since 2013. But remember, this is using the web DOM. That means it's running inside of a web view. It's not native to the device itself. So that's something you can also think about when we're working with that. The next one we'll talk about is Xamarin. Xamarin has been available since 2011. It's using the C# language. It has been bought by Microsoft a few years ago, and it's extremely popular, especially with .NET developers. The Azure administration application on iOS and Android is written in Xamarin. The UPS application for mobile is written in Xamarin, and it has hundreds of thousands of users every day. Alaska Airline and some other airlines as well use Xamarin. And also, most importantly for me, the Outback Steakhouse is written in Xamarin, which is very important for me to order my food. All right. The Xamarin application has two different things that you really need to be aware of, folks. There is something called Xamarin Native, and there is something else called Xamarin Forms. It will be your choice to which one you want to use for Xamarin. The part that a lot of people get confused about, they think that one of them is native, the other one is not. Actually, that is not correct. Both of them are native, believe it or not. There is no hybrid, there is no web view in either one of them. So the important part that you need to understand between writing code for Xamarin, for instance, to create your iOS and Android application, is that if you're using the Xamarin Native, 80% of the source code between iOS and Android will be shared. That will save us a lot of time, as you can probably imagine. Instead of having to write all the applications separately for iOS and then rewrite the application again for Android, and then maybe you'll have to do it a third time for Windows, that would be way too much work, and that will probably make the price of the building of the application very high. But if you're using Xamarin Native, 80% of the code will be included in one standard library. And you only have to concentrate on the user interface piece specifically for iOS or Android and Windows, and the other 20%. Very, very fast, very powerful. You can talk directly with the APIs to the Cocoa framework in Apple, for instance, and same thing with Java for Android. You can do that directly in C# code. But for those of you that want to create a line of business application, we call it the LOB application. Line of business application is probably like you want to bring up the app, log in, get some data from an API, maybe like a REST API from somewhere in your company, and then display it to the user. The user can click on confirm or yes or no, or do that kind of stuff. This is line of business application. This is not writing like a game where you have a multi-shooter and you need every single millisecond for the speed for all these graphic. So Xamarin Forms will be excellent for that. So we use heavily Xamarin Forms for line of business application. Instead of 80%, that can go up to 100% same code. That means you write the code, all of it, including the user interface, 100% will work on iOS and Android. Sometimes I would say it's only like 95%, because some things the customer will say, I want this screen to look different on iOS than Android. So no problem. The Xamarin Forms will allow us to make these modifications as well, so that we can actually modify only on one platform and do it differently on other platform. But you really don't have to do that. You can actually let it be the same user interface on both, and that will be 100% usability of code between the two platforms. Even for the 15 people still using the Windows Phone, they can actually use that as well. No, I'm just kidding. All right. Let's talk a little bit about PhoneGap. You probably heard about Adobe PhoneGap. This actually started in 2009, and then it was developed by a company called Nitobi, and it was acquired by Adobe in 2011. They split the architecture into one is free and one you have to pay for the services. So you will hear the word Apache Cordova, that's the free part, and there is the Adobe PhoneGap. They're pretty much the same thing. It only depends on whether you're going to pay for it or not. That's about it. This application or this framework, the Adobe PhoneGap, is actually a hybrid application. What you are building is something using JavaScript, HTML5, and CSS, and it will end up running inside of a sandbox, which is the web view itself. That doesn't mean that you cannot use the camera and the storage and the accelerometer and GPS. You can still use that, but somebody has to have the plugin that was written purely in C++ on the device that you'll have to install to be able to be the bridge between your application and that. It will have no direct access from the application to these things. Plugins will actually do the work for that. And there is a market that has tons and tons of different plugins that somebody have written in C++ to be able to get that bridge. Again, you can write the code in C# or Objective-C. It is definitely up to you. And there are a lot of different, very famous applications, like Wikipedia, for instance. Till today, it's written in Adobe PhoneGap. And the performance is just fine, even though it's running inside of a web view. It's not a native application. So you always have to really make the choice. When do you want to use a native app? When do you want to use a hybrid app? And so on and so forth. There is another framework called Corona. Well, what a coincidence for this year, right? Well, This is using a language called Lua. It's, again, not a very popular language, but again, for the people that have been coding for a long time, this at one time, long time ago, this was a very popular language as well. It started in 2009. And it's an open source platform. That's important to know as well. And you can write the application for not only for devices, but for the desktop, tablets, and also for smart TVs. It is a very lightweight scripting language. It is very fast and uses very flexibility for developer apps. All right. The only requirement this year for this framework is that you have to wear a mask when you're writing code for it. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. This jQuery mobile, this is something that has been available for a long time, since 2006, and it's building, of course, on top of the jQuery system. Probably from the word jQuery, a lot of you that have experience with web development, you will know that this will be based on the DOM, HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, and you'll be able to add to it something like Bootstrap or Semantic UI, Foundations, or any of these great things, Material Design, to make it look good. So it will build on top of the jQuery and the jQuery UI libraries automatically to be able to design this for a mobile. But again, it will be a hybrid app, of course, because it's an HTML5. Alrighty, Intel has an XDK. This actually ends up creating native application. Even though you're going to be using HTML5, CSS, and JavaScript, a lot of people, when they see these three together, automatically their mind goes that it's going to be hybrid. And you have the right, of course, to think like that, because it is true. If we're going to be using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you're probably going to need to run inside of a web view. But the Intel XDK actually end up taking all this, the JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, and compile it directly to a native app. So it is not running in a web view. It's actually running natively on the application, and they do the translations from your bridge for the JavaScript and HTML on the fly. So this performance for these applications are native. They are not hybrid. So that is using JavaScript, and the first release of it came out in 2013 for that. There is another one that is actually very famous. A lot of people like to use this one. This is a hybrid, alrighty, and this hybrid, that means it's going to be running in the web view, and it will allow you to write code for iOS and Android in a single code. So you can write the code once, and it will automatically use over 5,000 different APIs behind the scene to be able to split out a web view application, hybrid application for Android, iOS, Windows at the same time. It was first released in 2017, and that is called the Titanium framework, alrighty? So now I would like to, for instance, from all the 10 that I just showed you right now, which ones do we recommend the most, for instance? I mean, they're all great tools, depending, of course, on what you do. For a lot of the projects that we get here at American Eagle, we decided we can actually do it native. That means writing it, for instance, in like Objective-C or Swift or Java for these tools, for these frameworks. Or we can use, based on the requirements, we decided to go with React Native and Xamarin. If somebody comes to us and says, for instance, we'd love to use Flutter, there is no problem. We can definitely do that in Flutter as well. But in reality, based on 90% of the requirements that we get from our customers, we felt writing the code in Xamarin. And how do we choose between the two? We ask you about your developers and your resources. Do you have JavaScript developers, or do you have C# developers? Are you .NET house, or are you a JavaScript house? So based on these questions, we will end up making a recommendation whether the mobile app should be written in Xamarin or Xamarin Forms or React Native, and so on and so forth. Does that make sense? Also, there are other frameworks. For instance, there is one called Swiftic. You probably heard of it. It's coming from the word Swift, which is the language now Apple uses after Objective-C. It is very easy to use. It's really a beautiful framework to use Swiftic. The only problem with it is iOS only. You will not be able to use Swiftic to spit out the Android piece. So that actually makes it a little bit, you have to worry about it. I mean, I've never seen lately a customer coming to us and say, I would like you to build an application for me only for the iOS. I will never need an Android or a Windows or a Mac OS application. That usually never happens. But if you ever get that situation and you only care about iOS, Swiftic might be definitely a choice for you. There's a company in the Bay Area in California, in San Francisco, called Sencha Touch. That company has been available for a long time, very early on in the mobile world. But because of a lot of problems, unfortunately, on the board level and the management of the company, they lost a lot of momentum. But they used to be a powerhouse for mobile application. That is not the case anymore. Also, our friend of Progress, and I know a lot of you are actually customers of Sitefinity or other products from Progress, they have their own framework called native script. And it's very similar to the Intel XDK one, which is you can write the code in JavaScript or TypeScript and HTML5, but it actually ends up compiling the application to make it native. So native script apps do not run in a web view. They are native apps. The nice thing about it, this is an open source. It used to be very popular, especially about maybe 5 years ago. Google decided to use this language for all their applications. So that was an excellent marketing piece for Progress to actually be able to announce that Google standardized on using native script as their language. But of course, you can imagine after a couple of years from there, Google decided to go a different route with Flutter. And now native script is not as popular as it used to be 5 years ago when Google used to use it, all right? The next part, I just want to spend a couple of minutes to talk about the traditional way, the things that had been used for creating application in the past, whether it's Objective-C, that means you're going to be using Xcode on a Mac machine, and it will be very specific to iOS, or now people are using Swift. Swift is definitely a more elegant language than Objective-C. Again, everything is perspective depending on what you like, but Swift have proven for a lot of developers, and they made the shift. If you take a look also at the survey from the Stack Overflow for the 3.4 million developers for 2020, you will notice a lot of people migrated from Objective-C to Swift in the last couple of years because it's not as rigid as Objective-C, and also the performance of the language itself is pretty good. For Android, whether you are using Android Studio or using other tools, if you would like WebStorms, for instance, and so on, you can actually use Java or Kotlin to actually write the code for Android. But again, it is very specific to Android. That means I just wanted to show you this in case there is a requirement for only one platform, which is currently we don't see anymore. Everybody wants to build an application and make it available on iOS and Android and Windows at the same time, especially Android and iOS. Make sense? Let's go ahead and spend also a couple of minutes in talking about the progressive web apps. What is that? Let me go ahead and show you. Unfortunately, from the name of it, progressive web app, people get the wrong impression. They feel like you are creating a different app for being a progressive web app. It's actually not really an app. I mean, I think the last word here, app, confuses people. What a progressive web app is that, let's say, for instance, for our American Eagle website, if somebody comes and says, I want you to turn our website for www.americaneagle.com to be a PWA, a progressive web app. There are very specific things I'll have to do to the website, all right? I have to add something called a service worker JavaScript file. I will have to add some code in the application. I'll have to have a couple of configuration files and an assets for all different images that I'm gonna need. But I'm not gonna create a new app. It's something that you add to your current website directly, all right? So there is this JavaScript file called service worker where you're gonna be implementing all that stuff. What does that do to my website? So now, if I go pick up my iPhone, for instance, and go ahead and visit in my Safari, for instance, I go ahead and visit www.americaneagle.com. As soon as my device, Safari at this point, recognizes there is code inside of this website that makes it a PWA, it will allow me to click on that and be able to save this website as an icon on my home page, for instance. So now I'm actually making the website an application, even though it is really not a full application, but it will create a logo and an icon on my home page for Americaneagle.com. That means I can actually now take this phone, get on a plane, for instance, not having access to cellular or Wi-Fi or anything. And if I click on that icon that says Americaneagle.com, poof, it will be so fast because it will load directly from my device everything I told it in my service worker to actually make available in the storage device itself. Maybe not the whole website, because some things require this connection and the Wi-Fi or LTE or a cellular or whatever. But maybe I would just want to show you about us, the home page, make all the stuff static so I can stay on the device itself. And whenever we get to a page that requires connection, maybe we can show you a message like this will require a live connection to be able to get the information for. So notice in here, the fun part of it is the offline accessibility, be able to get to whatever you decide you want to show on the site offline using an app like this on the device itself. Also push notification, you can do that, so you can push notification. You can do background updates for the application in case the website changes, you can make that in the background automatically. You can still access the camera and the microphone and the storage and so on. Of course, nothing is perfect in this world. As you know, Apple likes to actually put a little bit of dings in things, so In Apple, only Safari will allow you to use PWAs on iOS, like iPhones and iPads. That means you cannot run Chrome, for instance, on an iOS device. And being able to do this, it has to be Safari, okay? And on Safari, you cannot get the push notification piece. And the maximum will be 50 megabyte max, which is fine for a lot of cases, depending, of course, on how much you would like to save from your website to be local on the device in case it's not connected. If you're doing this on an Android device, for instance, you have all the stuff out of the window. You have as much storage as you need. Even if you have an SD card, you can use the whole of it for that application if you want to. You will get all the push notification, and it will work on any browser, whether it's Chrome or anything else running on the Android device itself. But for Apple, you have to just be worried about that. Some frameworks out there will help you with this, by the way. So it's not something that you have to implement yourself. Of course, you can go ahead and read about Service Worker and how to implement all the offline accessibility and the fast loading and the push notification, or you can use one of these things. If your website was written in React, for instance, there is something called the React PWA library that you can actually really quickly pick and choose which pages and which data you would like to save, and it will do all the work for you and will generate the Service Worker JS file for you automatically. If your application or your website is written in Angular, there is one for that as well. If it's in Vue, available. Remember when I talked about Ionic? Again, Ionic has a PWA framework for that as well. We like to use the last two in here, the Webpack Module Bundler and the PWA Builder. So if our customers is using Kentico or Sitecore or Sitefinity, we can actually do all the work ourselves using the bundler to be able to add the assets and the Service Worker ourselves and bundle it with the Webpack so that the Kentico or Sitefinity or Sitecore or even Salesforce or Adobe sites for CMS, we can actually turn them into a PWA application, and we get to choose what gets saved on these devices as well. Make sense? So that's what a PWA is all about. It's not that big of a deal, but it's kind of fun to actually work with that as well. Let's go ahead and spend a couple of minutes talking about the future. So there is a lot of things happening in the future of mobile right now. There is something called MAUI, which we will talk about in a second. There is React Native for Windows and also for Mac OS. It's going on. It was just released about maybe 3.5 weeks ago during the Microsoft Ignite conference. Microsoft is working with Facebook on that. We'll also talk about the low-code, no-code for Microsoft Power Apps and AWS from Amazon for Honeycode, which you can actually build for both of them mobile apps without writing code at all. So this is a lot of the things in the next couple of years that we think will happen. Let's go ahead and talk about the first one. So the Microsoft MAUI one will be released next year, November of 2021. So we're about 13 months away from seeing that. And it will be running completely on .NET 6.0. Right now we're in beta of .NET 5. So we're very far from there, almost a year or 13 months. But the beautiful thing about MAUI is going to be building on top of the Xamarin Forms plus a lot more. That means with MAUI, you would be able to run on Windows, on iOS, on Android, and on Mac OS all natively. So that's a huge thing as well. So, and one of the nice things about actually working with American Eagle is that by December of this year, we will be able to give demos of MAUI to prepare all our customers for the future as well. So when this happens next year, everybody will be ready. But we do actually have early access to all the MAUI bits, and we're speaking on these things actually in Microsoft conferences early in 2021 as well. So we'll be able to share with you some demos on why this is great. And it's a single project with single code base. That is the beautiful thing about it. Single code base, single project to be able to spit out all the Windows, iOS, Android, and Mac OS as well. Alrighty. The first bits, like I said, will be coming out in December this year, and then the release will be 2021 in November. The next one, which is maybe it's a surprise for a lot of people, if you heard the word React Native, it has always been about iOS and Android. All right. And 3.5 weeks ago, Microsoft released a new open source project to make React Native available for Windows and for Mac OS as well. Not only for Windows as you expected, like a desktop. No, you will be able to write native apps, React Native apps to run on the Xbox directly. And this is available right now. So you can go to the GitHub, download the code, just look for the word React Native for Windows, and you'll be able to compile this application within minutes. There is samples there, and you will be able to upload it directly to your Xbox and see it running on your TV. And of course, you can run it as a desktop application, or you can deploy it to a Mac OS machine. So React Native is getting a lot of love right now. iOS, Android, Windows, Mac OS is currently available for you to develop with the same code that you have been writing before for React. All right, let's talk a little bit also about Microsoft Power Apps. The Microsoft Power Apps, this has been available for a couple of years now, and it has been extremely powerful. The part I'm interested in is the Power Apps mobile. So you can actually use something like Office 365, Dynamics 365, the entire stack of the Microsoft Azure Cloud, OneDrive, Excel, Slack. There is so many connectors. Actually, there is over 95 different connectors for applications that are Microsoft based or not. I mean, Slack is not Microsoft, so there's a lot of things like Salesforce and other tools as well. And using these Power Apps, notice the designer in here, without writing any code, I can just give it a connection to a database, or I can tell it where the API is and drag and drop to be able to design the full interface. So this is not like InVision where you can actually create a sketch of the application. No, we are creating the real application by dragging and dropping in here in Power Apps to be able to create a list of items coming in through an API. And again, it does not have any code whatsoever. Everything is available using wizards and dragging and dropping into the Power Apps to create these. So if your company want to create an application internal, maybe you have like 1,000 salespeople and you want them all to be connected through an app, you don't have to have this app, for instance, inside of the Apple Store and the Google Play. You can do it as an enterprise, create an account for Power Apps, create your application, and then everybody that is part of your Active Directory, for instance, will have access to this application and can run it and send the information live using Wi-Fi or LTE or whatever on the fly to the databases that this is using in the background. Isn't that cool? And the last one I wanted to show you is the AWS Honeycode, which was released about maybe 4 months ago. Actually, it was not released. The beta was released 4 months ago. This is still in beta. So it's a couple of years behind the Power Apps, but Amazon, of course, felt the need for this low code, no code. So it's very similar to Power Apps. And in the next few months, it will probably catch up and will have similar functionality as the one in Power Apps as well. But with Amazon, it's basing everything in workbooks, like almost Excel spreadsheet kind. So you'll be able to create all your tables and all your data in spreadsheet kind. So anybody could do it. You don't have to be a programmer. And again, you can drag and drop into a visual designer and be able to test it in your phone right away and deploy it for all your employees that are connected to the same organization. So they only have to have a registration to your organization and they will have access to it from their phone. There is no download from the App Store or the Google Play, but they will have it on their real device as well. And I think in the next couple of years, both these frameworks, the Honeycode and the Power Apps, will keep adding more and more functionality to make everybody, even if you're not a coder or a geek like me, to be able to create these applications with ease. And one of the things that I love the most, it's not available in Honeycode yet, but it's available in Power Apps. Maybe somebody who's not a coder can take it 90% of the way. And after that, they need a couple of extra advanced features. You can click on a couple of buttons and combine and bundle whatever you did and spit it out as code. And now a programmer can take whatever you did, open it up in Visual Studio and finish up the 10% of advanced features that you cannot do in the Power Apps. Honeycode will probably get there by the time it gets released or soon after, but this is the idea, is to be able to do almost everything, but there will be no walls. If you get to a point where the system cannot allow you to do it visually, maybe somebody can pick up the code and finish up the job instead of having to do everything in code from the beginning. Does that make sense? So where do we go from here? So the next steps, we are here definitely to help. So we can do so many things with you as a partner for our customers in here. We can engage with your team to establish a quick POC. So if there is something that you were thinking about, you want to actually come up with in your company as a mobile application, we would love to help you create at least a POC in a very, very short amount of time to find out if this is a viable idea and if it will be able to work. And we can actually make recommendation, whether it's Xamarin, React Native, or completely native like Swift or Java or whatever. We can help with that. We can also help with architecture decision and overviews or your next mobile apps. Maybe it's just a whiteboard discussions. We want to find out what you have and what you don't have and what would it take to build something. Take a look at the blueprint and give you solid architecture based on our experience for the last 10 years building mobile applications. Also, we can train your technical team. Maybe your technical team are very strong in web or desktop, but they haven't done mobile technology before. We'll be more than happy to customize training sessions to bring them up to speed based on what they're interested in. Are they a .NET shop? They would like to do that in C# like in Xamarin, or they would like to use JavaScript for React Native or something else. We'll be more than happy to bring your team up to speed with that. And finally, which our bread and butter for a lot of our customers is to fully implement the whole application. Maybe you do not have resources, or they're all being used to the max, and maybe you would like American Eagle for us to come in and build the architecture and build and fully implement your mobile application for the future. So these are all of the things that we can definitely do for you. So put us in mind for that. And with that, I would love to leave the rest of the time to maybe answer some of your questions. So I want to say thank you for your definitely generous time with me in the last 40 minutes or so. And I hope you enjoyed it. And thank you again for being our customers. And Alice, I'll be more than happy to take any questions that you have, or if anybody's entering any questions in the system.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you, Lino. Absolutely. We have some time for questions. And as a reminder, if you haven't done so yet, you can still submit any of your questions right into the questions panel in the GoToWebinar panel there. So it looks like we did get a couple questions. The first one is, how do I choose which framework is best to build a mobile app on?
That's an excellent question. There is a lot of choices. There is no such thing as like one is better than the other. It all depends on what you're doing. So for instance, if you come to me and say, Lino, we would like you to build a game for us. We would like to build a game with multiple shooters, for instance, and it has a major GPU use for the graphics, which changes every millisecond and so on. I wouldn't do it in React Native or Xamarin or Flutter or any of those already. I would actually have to sit down and do it in Swift or Objective-C or in Java for Android to be able to get every single millisecond possible out of all the stuff. I don't want to add any extra layers. But if you come to me, for instance, and say, I would like to build an app that is a line of business. I have an API. I'm connecting, for instance, to SAP or to Salesforce or to Dynamics or any other system that has an API, and I would like my customer to be able to log in, get the data, pick whichever data they want, and then move between different screens and being able to edit them, delete them, do all the CRUD operations from there. I don't need that millisecond performance. I still, of course, want it to be performant, but it doesn't have to be like a game GPU intensive kind of thing. So in that case, yes, I will be able to use Xamarin, I'll be able to use React Native, I'll be able to use others, and it will work very well and it will perform extremely well as well. We have a lot of apps written in those and they perform very, very well. So the question probably is, if it's between Xamarin and React Native, how do I pick between the two? And honestly, I would say it's based on your resources. If you would like to punt on the whole thing and let American Eagle work on it, we will make that decision on which one we do. But if you have resources, let's say your team has 5 different excellent .NET developers that know C# very well, my recommendation would be use Xamarin, because it would be a very short amount of time for them to learn that framework because they already know .NET and C#. If your team, like you have 4 or 5 developers that are excellent in web technology, they are excellent in JavaScript, HTML5 and CSS and so on, it will behoove me to tell you, please use React Native, because they will feel at home. They just need to add the knowledge of React Native and React, but they don't have to learn all the .NET and C# from scratch for them to be productive. So it really is based on what you have. It's not like one or the other based on a project. They both can do a job very, very well. And we are both here. We have a lot of different projects going on for mobile, and we're using both of them based on our choice or the customer choice, and they are all successful in getting the customer up to speed with that stuff. Does that make sense?
Yes, great. Thank you, Lino. One more question that came in. What is required to use the Power Apps? What licenses are needed?
Well, first of all, Power Apps is free for a limited, like maybe 5 users or so. Once you actually have to deploy this for more than 5 users, you can actually go to the Power Apps app and click on the pricing hyperlink, and it will tell you if you have a lot more than that, you will do it. For AWS, it's similar. You can actually start for free, and then you'll have to pay like $40 per month or so, but you can definitely start for free. But remember also, there is limitation in AWS Honeycode that you cannot have a table that has more than 100,000 records. And that could be very sufficient, but if you need more than 100,000 records in a table, Honeycode right now will not be able to accommodate that. That is not a limitation in Power Apps, but Power Apps for 5 users on the app is free, and all the tools are free as well. Make sense?
Yes, great. And then one more, how can we automate all the deployment to make our app enterprise level quality?
That is the fun part. So the fun part, folks, is that, okay, we have people that know actually how to write the code, whether it's in React or Xamarin or even pure and Objective-C and Swift and Java. The React, it's not about a one person sitting down with a laptop writing code, and sometimes it's more than that. It's about having 4 or 5 people that need to play in the game. We have QA testers, we have 2 or 3 developers, we have project management. So here at American Eagle, we do this at an enterprise level. That means we have an account for App Center, and we also have the Azure DevOps and GitHubs. So that means the whole thing is using CI/CD. That means continuous integration and continuous deployment. So when you check in a file into your React Native or in Xamarin, that automatically triggers a build in the App Center. And then after it successfully builds, it automatically sends it to be a release, and automatically the release will sign the code with your certificates for Apple or your key store for Android. And then we will automatically test it using an app that we have written already in multiple devices. And after all that stuff, it will notify all the people associated with the release, like QA, R&D, everybody, that the build is available. So the only thing you'll have to do is to open up your phone, go to the email, click on a button, and it will install the application for you to test it directly on the device itself. Or you can do it in a simulator as well. But the important thing is that you don't want to do all these things yourself every time you have a build. That would be too much work, especially the signing for Apple takes a long time, and the key store and generating all of these certificates and everything. So you want to do everything in CI/CD. Just check in a file, wait 10 minutes, and you will be notified that everything happened and there is an application ready for you to test. So the enterprise level that we are using here on all our mobile applications is significantly reducing the time that we develop apps with very high quality as well. Make sense?
Yes, wonderful. So it looks like that's all the questions we had. If anyone has any additional questions, you can send us an email at foruminfo@Americaneagle.com, and we can make sure Lino gets you a reply back. We're also going to be sharing a recording of today's session, so if you'd like to rewatch or share with a colleague, you will be receiving that recording. But it looks like that's all the time we have for today. So thank you, Lino, again for taking us through today's great content and for wrapping up our 3rd advanced session in our forum series.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And as a reminder, we are excited to welcome Lino back tomorrow for an exciting keynote session on machine learning and AI. We also have 2 final forum sessions next week. A listing of what we have left is up on your screen now. If you haven't registered for one of these sessions and you would still like to, it's not too late. You can visit Americaneagle.com/forum-2020 and fill out the short form, and we'll get you all registered. So thank you again to everyone for spending time with us. When I close the webinar, you will see a survey pop up. If you could take a minute to complete that, we would love your feedback. Thank you again to everyone for your time, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, folks. Bye-bye.